Today we're going to be talking about the bullish transport trucks of the Imperial Guard, the Taurox and the Taurox Prime. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. So the Taurox and its slightly fancier cousin, the Taurox Prime, are another relatively recent addition to the Imperial Guard motor pool, coming out at a similar time to the Militarum Tempestus Scions and giving us an alternative to the Chimera to transport the Guardsmen. To put it lightly, the looks of this truck somewhat divide opinions. It certainly isn't famed for being one of the prettiest kits that Games Workshop ever made. In this video we're going to be taking a look at its rules, any obvious combos and synergies in the Astra Militarum army, and how I would use them on the tabletop. In the background, the Taurox is a robust and speedy APC with thick armour plates and quad track units that allow it to traverse most terrain. The trucks can hurtle through dense city environments and rubble-strewn wastelands with near equal speed. It isn't quite as durable as the sturdy Chimera APC, but its Castellan pattern tracks allow it to achieve a slightly greater speed, which is certainly favoured by units such as the Militarum Tempestus, who favour their Taurox Prime to make rapid response ground units out of their Scion forces, and upgrade the standard Taurox's autocannon armament with more serious weapons such as the Taurox Battle Cannon, Gatling Cannons, and Taurox Missile Launcher. On the tabletop, the Taurox will set you back 70 points for a single vehicle equipped with 2 autocannons, and you have the option to buy a heavy stubber or stormbolter for an additional 2 points, which I think is pretty much always worth it. It's a dedicated transport vehicle for Codex Astra Militarum, and in keeping with the fluff has a pretty decent movement stat line of 14 inches. It has a ballistic skill of 4+ though, so if it is moving it won't be hitting very well with those autocannons. It has a strength and toughness of 6, so a bit weaker than your standard Chimera. 10 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 7 and a 3+ save. Even though it does hit on 5s, those dedicated autocannons aren't really too bad an armament for a otherwise dedicated transport vehicle, particularly if you're using Talon. If you are expecting it to get up close and personal with the enemy, I typically recommend the Stormbolter over the Heavy Stubber, but if you are playing Talon then probably the Heavy Stubber wins out, due to not suffering the move and shoot penalty. Tauroxes can transport only 10 Astra Militarum infantry, which is a negative over the Chimera. And as per normal, each veteran weapon team or heavy weapons team takes the space of 2 guardsmen, and each Ogren takes the space of 3. So cheap, fast, and with a little bit of long-ranged fire support. If we turn our attention to the Taurox Prime, which is locked to the Militarum Tempestus Scions, this one essentially has the exact same profile except has a ballistic skill of 3+, and its cost is slightly higher to reflect this. It's slightly outgunned compared with the standard Taurox as well, at base being armed with a Taurox Battle Cannon and 2 hotshot volley guns. This puts your cheapest Taurox Prime at 112 points, which to be honest is reasonably expensive for such a fragile vehicle. Unfortunately, that Taurox Battle Cannon is far less impressive than the standard Battle Cannon affair. It has a 48-inch range, heavy D6, strength 7, AP -1 and damage D3, so it's kind of more of an equivalent of 2 autocannons than a standard battle cannon. You can pay 2 points to upgrade it to the Taurox Gatling Cannon, which is a 24-inch range, heavy 20 shots, strength 4, AP nothing and damage 1. The Gatling Cannon is of course far shorter ranged, meaning that you're likely going to have to move to have it take effect, and you're going to be a little bit more limited in terms of targets, but against most things that aren't toughness 5 or 6, it will actually do better than the Taurox Battle Cannon, provided they don't have a 2+ save. So in terms of raw damage output, for just 2 points more than the Battle Cannon, it might be the way to go, particularly because you are buying a Taurox Prime. You're likely wanting to transport Scions closer to the enemy, so you might well be getting in range to use it. The third option is more pricey still. The Taurox Missile Launcher will cost you an extra 10 points above the Taurox Gatling Cannon, putting you at 124 points for your Taurox Prime. This one's pretty much the equivalent of a Space Marine Typhoon missile launcher with 48-inch range that fires 2 frag or 2 crack missiles, so it's pretty generalist and can put a decent hurt on most targets, but you're going to get most value out of those missile shots. I think that this one's reasonably well balanced compared with the Battle Cannon for what you get extra. You do gain a decent amount of vehicle busting power, but at the cost of an extra 12 points. The Taurox also has the option to upgrade its hotshot volley guns to 2 autocannons. These will cost you 3 points more apiece, so 6 points to upgrade the pair. The hotshots really aren't too bad weapons in themselves, 24-inch range, strength 4, AP -2 weapons that have a heavy 4 profile. They'll do better against light infantry with decent saves than the autocannons, but of course they're shorter ranged and won't generally do quite as well against medium tanks and flyers. In particular, the autocannons can have decent synergy with the missile launcher and battle cannon, as they're both quite long ranged and want to be targeting the same sort of similar targets. Finally, the model can take either a heavy stubber or a stormbolter on the turrets. Again, for 2 points, these are pretty much always worth taking, particularly on a ballistic skill 3+ platform. I typically advocate the Stubber if you're staying at arm's length, or the Stormbolter if you're getting up close and personal. Again, the Taurox Prime can transport 10 models, but this time it's only limited to Militarum Tempestus, Officio Prefectus infantry, so Commissars and Scions. Let's talk a little bit about how we can buff these guys on the board then. The regular Taurox, as I mentioned, I think Talon are probably the strongest regiment choice for them. Being able to move and fire while keeping up decent accuracy on autocannons and heavy stubbers is great, and basically you are going to need to take advantage of that decent movement if you want to be getting your value out of the Taurox. The other regiments do offer their own advantages. Obviously Cadian gets better shooting if you stand still, Valhallan sort of grade is slower, Armageddon have some synergy with transports, and ignore AP-1 on vehicles, but really in my opinion none of them really compare to Talon. One of the next best options in my eyes would actually be a custom regiment with jury-rigged repairs to allow the Taurox to repair some battle damage as the game goes on. For the primes, as of the greater good, we now have different Militarum Tempestus regimental doctrines that we can apply to that too. The standard Stormtroopers one isn't awful though, as if you're in a pure Militarum Tempestus detachment, then you'll get extra attacks on a 6, not at all bad for a transport that wants to be getting up quite close and personal to deliver its cargo. From the new regiments, the Lambton Lions are a decent one, having AP-1 on their weapons, which could soup up a Taurox Gatling Cannon, but it's certainly not bad on any of the Taurox Prime's weapons. And this regiment also does have access to easy reroll 1s via one of their relics or warlord traits. The Scion Jackals have their ability for every model destroys counting as 2 models for the purposes of morale, which could allow your Taurox Prime to really inflict some leadership damage on enemy units even at a long range. And the Capic Eagles have some synergy with transports themselves, because their infantry get +1 to hit when they disembark from a transport in the same turn, so really emphasise this is the tactic of piling out of a Taurox Prime and unloading special weapons and things into the enemy. In general, I wouldn't typically be looking to support these guys with characters to any major degree. Obviously, if you can get them in reroll bubbles for Yarick or someone, then it's not bad. But their main job isn't to deal damage, it's more to deliver squads to the fray. You might be able to combine characters inside the Taurox, but of course it's a little bit harder to do than on your Chimeras, because they only have 10 models transport capacity rather than the Chimera's 12. Much like the Chimera, the Taurox can be fielded as part of the Emperor's Blade Assault Company, the one that specialises in transport vehicles, infantry squads, special weapons squads, and veteran squads. This one mainly allows you access to a couple of decent stratagems, including the rapid redeploy option, which allows Emperor's Blade units embarked within Chimeras or Tauroxes to disembark, and then they can still even shoot or charge that turn, which is particularly powerful with the Taurox's very long move range. In a pinch, you could also have your Taurox fire Overwatch at full ballistic skill into enemy units that are charging your infantry formations, which you can do with the Mechanized Fire Support stratagem for 1 command point. I'm not sure how worth it that one would be though. You are going to only be averaging a couple of autocannon hits on the charging unit, so it really would have to be a very fragile and very killy melee unit to make any difference. In terms of stratagems, they both have access to a reasonable amount. There's all the usual vehicle ones, including Crush Them, Vengeance of Acadia, Jury Rigging, and Defensive Gunners. From the new Psychic Awakening book, we have Relentless, the one that allows them to fight on their top profile for a turn, and a unique Taurox specific one called Rolling Death, which allows a Taurox from your army to add 1 to the hit roll of its shooting attacks if it moves less than half its move characteristic in the preceding movement phase. I believe this one can be used on the Taurox or the Taurox Prime. Frankly, it's a bit underwhelming when buffing just a couple of autocannons, but if you're really trying to pump up the damage output from a Gatling Cannon, missile launcher, or the other armament from a Taurox Prime, then I think it could be more worth it. As most of the weapons are heavy weapons though, you could have made the same firepower happen just by staying still, so it's going to be in a situation where you absolutely need that up to 7-inch move, and also you absolutely need the full damage output rather than just being very slightly less. I don't think it's the best stratagem, but I think it could have some situational uses. On the Scion side of things, one of the custom regiments, the Theatid Eagles, have a Taurox Prime related stratagem as well. If it's within 12 inches of the enemy for 1 command point, you can reroll all hits. This one is quite potent, but it does require you to be that one specific Scion regiment. The main decision with the transport vehicles is what you actually want to put inside them, and Tauroxes do make this a little bit more difficult, as we've said, as they only have 10 slots rather than the 12 of the Chimera, which makes them a lot more flexible. Obviously infantry squads are a reasonable choice, or veteran squads for some upgunned infantry. You've also got things like special weapon squads or command squads, maybe 1 of each inside the Taurox to maximise its efficiency. And naturally from the Militarum Tempestus, you could think about either multiple command squads, or a couple of small squads of Tempestus Scions armed with special weapons. Things like plasma guns or other close-range firepower are going to be more valuable in these squads, as you can a lot more guarantee that they'll actually get to fire before getting gunned down, unlike on infantry that are just deployed in the open. In game, typically these days, I think that people tend to have most success with either running a lot of transports or none of them. Often a lone Taurox or Chimera doesn't have the biggest impact on the game in itself. By having a lot of infantry squads in Chimeras or Tauroxes, you will force the opponent to chew through armoured holes before they can get to your more vulnerable infantry, and this can create some interesting targeting priority issues, particularly if those infantry happen to be on objectives. In general, with mechanised infantry, you can be fairly reactive to your opponent's army due to the decent move value that they have and their semi-reasonable fire output. Against gunline armies, you can pretty much just go for a headlong charge and try and get your men up the field absolutely as quickly as possible. Against more melee-orientated armies, you could sit back a little bit more, maybe make them endure a few turns of autocannon firepower before doing a counter-attack and jumping out with special weapons and infantry squads. If you're using a big army, it's usually worth remembering prepared positions if you're going second. If you can get any line of sight blockers to any of your Tauroxes, that's always handy to stop your opponent shooting from exactly what they want. And once the Tauroxes have disgorged their contents, they're quite good distraction units, being reasonably tough, meaning they could potentially charge and lock up enemy gunline elements, and just generally get in the way, blocking movement, or potentially even moving to try and score far-flung objectives. The main differences with Toros Primes are that you're paying a lot more for the chassis, meaning that in general you're going to be wanting to be a fair bit more careful with them, and you aren't incentivized to be quite as gung-ho about throwing them straight into the enemy lines, as you're losing a lot of points for every single one that goes down. So playing a little bit more cagey, maybe using line of sight locking terrain to keep them alive till later in the game, might be a bit more of a better idea. The main question comes as to whether or not the Taurox is better than the Chimera. At some point we might do a full video comparing all the merits of both of them, but the broad strokes are that the Taurox has a very slight extra speed, while being a bit more fragile at toughness 6, has a little bit less transport capacity, and is equipped with autocannons rather than multi-lasers and heavy bolters and lasgun arrays. I do think that the two are fairly close. In my instincts, I think the Chimera wins out slightly, though I think it does warrant looking into a little bit further. For me, durability is one of the main things that you need in a transport vehicle, and the Chimera's being better, plus those lasgun arrays for some cheap firepower while there's a unit inside the vehicle, they're really quite decent advantages. The Taurox Prime is somewhat in a bit of a field of its own, being the main one for Scions. In general, I don't think it compares particularly well to more standard guard direct range firepower, such as Lehman Russ tanks for example, which means that you do need to be looking to use it as a transport vehicle to actually get value out of it, compared with getting just some more heavy hitting units. Overall, I'd say that the Taurox and Taurox Prime aren't enormously competitive at the moment, I'm afraid, mainly because of the way that transport vehicles works and mechanised infantry guard not necessarily being the strongest way to run them right now. Honestly, I think that the biggest thing that would help them would be a change in the transport rules, as often it's faster just to get infantry squads to their target just by using move, move, move and an officer, which costs far less and lets you buy more infantry. If you do have any insights on the Taurox or Taurox Prime, then please let me know down in the comments below. It's always good to hear other guard players' insights. And if you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we have regular 40k content coming out every single day. If you'd like to support the channel, I do have a Patreon page, the link is in the description down below. Making all of these videos takes quite a long time, so any support for the creation of them that you can spare is absolutely amazing, particularly if you are listening regularly. And a massive thank you to my current Patreons for help making this channel possible. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you guys next time.